You are underpaid as a product manager in the US. Let me tell you why. My name is Alex. I used to be a group PM at Google, and now I run the PCA, Product Career Accelerator, where we help proactive experienced PMs get into the top tech companies. Now, my thesis here is unless you make $500,000 a year or more, you are severely underpaid as a PM. Outrageous, you say. I make six figures as a PM. Well, let's break that down, shall we? I think you're underpaid. Let's go through the data. So I've got for you today 3,600, more than 3,600 PCA applications. These are from real PMs that have applied to work with us at the Product Career Accelerator. And here's the breakdown. Let's just dig right into it. Now, keep in mind, of course, there is a sampling bias here. So most folks that are reaching out to us for help, getting into $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 roles do not make that much. And that is why they're reaching out, because most of the folks we work with make less because we're trying to help them get into those $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 roles. We do work with some director and leadership roles as well, but the core audience, the core folks that come to us for help are the folks that make less, which is probably where you come in. So there's certainly a sampling selection bias involved, but nonetheless, we can already take a lot from this data. So let's dig into it. We've got 3,600 total. The majority make under 150,000. However, there's still quite a few in here already that make over 500 or between 350 and 500 or between 250 and 350. So we've got 10% of people that are making over 350,000 and 20%, 24% that are making over 250,000. Even on this highly selective list where there's a lot of selection bias already, where folks that are making a lot are coming into this list less often. So it's a selection bias. This is a fairly accurate one because we do speak to a lot of the folks on this list. We only speak to the folks that are approved through our application process, which is a relatively small percentage of applications. Nonetheless, we speak to a lot of folks on the list, so we know this compensation is accurate. This is self-reported, so there's a little bit of movement that can be allowed, but for the most part, we have confirmed these numbers so we can trust this data. And you can probably find yourself somewhere on this list, probably around 150,000, which is kind of the median one that we found, but it could also be under 150. So just right off the bat, there are PMs that are on this list that are making over 250,000. So just on that definition alone, we can stop the video and confirm that yes, you indeed are underpaid. But let's go a little bit deeper. Of course, we also do get offers inside PCA 400, 500 and above. So we know that, of course, these data points exist and they're real, and that is the real compensation that people are making in actual liquid cash. So a lot of times I hear just the very first line of questioning is this even real? So hopefully this addresses that concern. Yes, it is real, and those are real compensation numbers. Now let's talk through these common misconceptions. Hey, these $500,000 PMs all come from top schools. That's not necessarily so. It's not as relevant anymore. And even though a lot of them are from top schools, it is not as helpful anymore in actually getting you a callback. And even if it is only helpful to get you a foot in the door. And for that purpose, a lot of times people do go to educational top educations and receive top education from top schools. And sometimes top tech companies also source from like post MBA. But for the most part, it is not that important anymore. So it's not as relevant anymore. And also, it's not true that these high-earning PMs come from top schools. That's just not what we see. The second one that we hear is that they have a heavy technical background. There's a lot of computer science background and all that. Well, first of all, this is the age of AI, so this is not as important anymore. Certainly, you should understand your way around concepts, technical concepts, computer science concepts, programming, data analytics, things like that. But this is something that you can easily pick up the fundamentals, at least, very quickly for free on the internet. And in the age of AI, again, a lot of these things can be facilitated with our handy AI co-pilots. So this is not as much of a concern. And also, frankly, I haven't even seen this to be the majority of candidates or the majority of PMs to have a technical background in the last 10 years even. So this is not true. They don't need to have a heavy technical background. How about just being better at the job? I mean, certainly they've got to be better. I mean, they could be, but let's talk about what it actually means to be better. We're talking about skills, experiences, and opportunities. So skills, you can decompose down to the raw skills. There's like soft skills, some hard skills, but largely it's communication, organization, execution. And if you break those skills down, can you not make progress on those skills? I think that you can. So there's nothing that they're doing that's superhuman. Experiences, yes. This we'll get into this a little bit more later, but experiences are knowing certain domains, working at a certain scale or scope, understanding how certain systems work, and just accumulating different types of work experience. And this is true. They do have a variety of experiences. But again, unless you start on that path, you're never going to be on that path. So the way that you get those experiences is by trying to get on that path. And opportunities, this is certainly true. You get more opportunities as you become a high paid PM because you have recognizable tech companies on your resume and in your experience, which opens more doors. But again, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. You're not going to get these into these companies without having these companies. So you might as well start working on trying to get into some recognizable company. We'll get a little bit deeper into this later on. But the idea is that, yes, they do have access to greater opportunities, and you can too if you start on the path there. They do have access to more experiences, and you can too if you start on the path. And skills, you can break down what skills they are and actually work on those on your job right now. You can make progress on this immediately. And then over the long term, you can make consistent progress into this as you engage in some of those bigger companies. All right. And then the final one is they've all worked for these top tech companies. And that one is true. It is hard to make a lot of money as a product manager unless you work for a top tech company, because the big component comes from the equity part, which is you having public shares of a public company. So that's true, and which is why I say we need to get you, first things first, into as recognizable of a company as we can as soon as possible. So if you've been working in startups your whole career, or if you're early in your career, let's get you into a more recognizable company. And of course, this is a spectrum, goes from not recognizable at all to your Google and Meta, which is totally recognizable. It's a spectrum, and we want to start getting closer and closer and farther up that spectrum to unlock more and more doors and more opportunities until we can access these compensation levels. All right, then you could say, well, if there's thousands of PMs, how many PMs do they even have at these top tech companies? Do they even need this many? Well, let's look at the numbers. There's nearly 10,000 PMs at Google, 5,000, I think, at Meta, give or take. There's probably 30 to 50,000 in all of top tech companies in the US, probably 50 to 100,000 in all other companies in the US, not just top tech. But nonetheless, in our list, we see there's only 700 or 1,000, or how many did we have? 500 earning from 250 to 350, and another maybe 400 making over 350. So clearly, there's room for 1, 10, 100,000 more in these PMs at these top tech companies. And finally, since the majority of you product managers toiling away are working on your startups and not making a whole lot, you'll tell me my startup is about to 10x. Maybe, but probably not. Unfortunately, I see the other side of this survivor bias. For every success story and IPO and 10x and valuation and everything, there's 100 or 1,000 other startups that don't go the distance. So let's not talk about optimism, pessimism. Let's just be honest. So how are you actually going to increase your compensation in the startup? There's got to be a liquidity event of some kind. If you have, first of all, if you don't have shares, there's no way for you to actually get more compensation and get richer from the startup. But let's say you do have shares. Let's say if you have significant equity in your startup. Well, if there's no secondary market, which often there isn't, which means you can't sell your shares, you got to wait for a liquidity event, either a purchase or more likely an IPO. You need some sort of a public offering so that you can actually sell your shares in the broader pool on the public market, which allows you to usually generate at least some upside from it. So be honest, how likely is this to happen? What needs to be true for this to happen? So think a little bit more like an investor. Evaluate your startup like an investor. What are you working on? Do you really have a shot at 5x, 10x, 20x? of your equity? Do you have any equity? How are you going to get some equity? So just be realistic with this stuff. Otherwise, you're going to continue to stay in this under 150 or $150,000 range, and you really won't have anyone to blame but yourself. And again, I'm sorry if this is a little shocking, but this is the reality. I keep on harping about this because I think people just don't understand the opportunity cost. If you're already a product manager and already in the US, which a lot of folks, of course, are outside the country. So their step one is, how do you get into the US or another market where product management is highly paid? But if you are in the US and if you do have product management experience already, then the opportunity cost becomes very, very real for you. And the question is, all right, you win, I'm underpaid. What now? Well, a lot. Next, I've got a whole video on it and I'll link it somewhere below. But look, first of all, it's going to be a challenge to get to the next level. If you have no recognizable companies and if you're outside the major geographies and if you don't have a lot of product management experience, it's going to be an uphill battle, but it doesn't mean that it's not worth it. So if you know where you're headed, I think you're going to be much more likely to actually get there. So just accept that getting the next level will be challenging. And decide for yourself if you want to pursue this. It's going to be a marathon. As we say inside PCA, you got to have a marathon mindset for this stuff. You got to think over months, quarters, and years sometimes in order to get to these really, really exceptional, again, look at these numbers, very real numbers, 260 folks between 350, 500, 109 already over 500, and many, many dozens of people inside PCA getting offers at the 500, 400, and 600 $1,000 range. So decide if this is what you want to do. It's okay if not, but you know the opportunity cost. Next thing to keep in mind is geography matters. That means San Francisco and Seattle usually are going to have the majority of the opportunities, and then the other metros, New York, Austin, Denver, are going to pick up the rest of it. If you're outside of those markets, you're only going for remote, of which there are plenty of opportunities, but you're competing for everybody else that's going for remote. So I would recommend rethink your geography if you seriously want to be a contender for the $500,000 roles. And then the focus should be on getting those first recognizable company names on your resume, because we're trying to open up the opportunities. We're trying to get our foot in the door. And your 4 startups that you've worked on that nobody knows are not going to get you a call back from the recruiter from top tech, big tech, or medium sized companies. We need recognizable names for the recruiter or the hiring manager to be able to grab onto your resume and actually call you back. And there's a lot of other stuff that we need to do. It's summarized by working proactively. You have to work on this every day if you want to make this happen. And it can happen, but it's got to require dedication and, like I said, marathon mindset. I'm going to link a separate video about all the step-by-steps that you actually need to do. Other than that, hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, obviously leave them in the comments. I'll see you next time.